Like, oh, there's this new thing called mindset coaching. It's gonna fix up my mind. I'm not gonna be like anxious and worried about stuff anymore. And then we're gonna be on our way. And then, within 3 months, I went from like $300 an hour online poker crusher to break even, completely freaking out. We are endlessly innovative and creative and, like you said, resilient, relentless about coming up with all sorts of different ways to not just sit there and feel what we're feeling.
Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of the Seeking Balance podcast. Just so you know, we're going to be working on adjusting things as these episodes release. So if you notice things like with the intro changing and stuff like that, I promise we'll settle on something at some point. But for now, it's a lot of trial and error. So I appreciate your patience. Today, I bring you an amazing conversation with a good friend of mine, Jason Su. Jason Su and I work in the same field, helping people find their highest levels of performance at some of the most high-pressure moments of the game. Jason is the author of the book Poker with Presence. He was himself a high-stakes poker player, and he brings an incredible amount of insight into how some of the most conventional mindset advice breaks down in practice. And he sheds a lot of wisdom on what he has found to be the really only successful way to relate with difficult emotions in the heat of gameplay. So I really enjoyed talking with Jason. He's a good friend, and we talk as often as we get to. And so without further ado, I bring you Jason Su. Jason, thank you so much for doing this, man.
Always happy to chat, man. I love all of our interactions. So another one, I'm in.
Yeah, this is round 3. I am going to point people to the first 2. We're not going to spend too much preamble on your and I's history or stuff. I have 2 other conversations on my YouTube people can check out. I recommend they check them out, but I'm not going to spend too much time introducing you or your background or myself. First, I want to say, by the way, that I just want to say how much of an influence you've been in my life. And we've had a limited number of interactions, but I just really appreciate having gotten to know you over the last few years. And I was initially getting into coaching and met you, and the interactions we had really had a positive impact on my own approach to coaching and finding my own way and what I'm doing. So I just want to say that how much I appreciate your influence in my life and how fortunate I feel to have gotten to know you.
Thanks so much, man. I really appreciate that. Yeah, that means a lot. So yeah, I'm happy to hear that, and I'm happy you're out there doing your thing, and we'll just keep it going.
Yeah, for sure. So you and I are kind of in the same space. We both do coaching with poker players. I don't really know if you call what you do mental game or I call what I do performance coaching. It's basically working on the soft skills that orbit performance in poker, and that's really the whole theme of this podcast is what are the things that are not explicitly technical that really enhance your ability to play. But I would say you and I kind of run counterculture and to what a lot of people what might come up for a lot of people when they think, how do I improve my quote unquote mental game? How do I relate to how do I not tilt, for example, or how do I bring the best version of myself out at the table? And I think a good exercise, and I spoke to you about this before we started recording in this, I'd be curious if you could kind of steelman how you view, let's say, conventional mental game wisdom. Like there's ideas around, say, reframing things. So, you just need to reframe the problem. So if I'm in the midst of a downswing, I just need to reframe what it is and tell myself basically, not to be result oriented or whatever. There's that, and just this kind of uh, I'm trying to not use condescending language when talking about this, but the attitude of like you can just kind of, if you just, everything is thought based, right? If you just think the right thing, your feelings will kind of fall in line. If you just have the right beliefs and work to have the right beliefs and reframe things, view things differently, then you won't tilt and you'll perform at your best, and you'll can you kind of give a best, like, what is the best argument you can give for that way of approaching
Mm.
mental game, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and I'm glad you're not going to do the condescending language. That way I can be the guy that does the
Yeah,
condescending language. Because that's what I do. So yeah, I can totally give the position on why people are so attracted to this model, right? Of like, I'm gonna do mindset coaching, gonna get my mind right, we're gonna do that, and then everything's gonna be good. Because I was like the first guy in line for this probably like 15, 16 years ago. I was one of the first people. I was like, oh, there's this new thing called mindset coaching. It's gonna
Mm,
fix up my mind. I'm not gonna be like anxious and worried about stuff anymore. And then we're gonna be on our way. And then, within 3 months, I went from like $300 an hour online poker crusher to break even,
wow.
completely freaking out, total just destruction of self and questioning my entire existence, no confidence whatsoever. And so I've seen both sides. So I'll lay out the reason why I think that people are so drawn to it, which is that one, it sounds really simple and easy, right? So we're gonna change your mindset. We're gonna change the things that you think, and then that's going to change the way that you behave, right? Real simple. One leads to two. And so if you're somebody who has not really done any work inside yourself, it sounds really good, right? And you don't
Mm,
you don't really know anything else, and somebody's like, hey, this is a solution, and nobody else has ever offered you anything, you'd be like, hey, okay, great, let's roll, let's do it, right? And then you get into the work, and now they say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to train you to, this is the big one I've been kind of harping on lately. It's just like, okay, when something happens and you don't like it, you take a bad beat, you get aces all in and you get them cracked, you just gotta let it go, right? You just gotta let it go, keep
mm,
playing your game. Again, sounds really good. One leads to two. If I let it go, I'm gonna start playing really good poker again, right? I'm not gonna tilt if I just let it go. Okay. And what that does is it gives you this confirmation that you are in control of your experience, right? That's ultimately what
mm,
people in that position are craving, is this feeling of control. Because when you go on tilt and then you dust off all your money, what happens is you're like, God, I hated that because I was so out of control,
mm.
right? And so the mindset coaching model is going to say, okay, we can give you this control back. What you got to do is you got to let it go, and you got to not think about it this way, think about it that way. And so that really just kind of strokes the ego and be like, oh, I can control my experience, and then that's going to control the quality of my play. So that's the argument for it. It's simple, it's clear.
Yeah.
If it worked, I'd be the first guy on
Yeah.
board with it, right? See, because I was the first guy on board
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
it. I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
just take my money, give me this, right? And so I would be all about it, 100%. I'd give up my whole business if this worked. I'd be happily just doing this because it's way easier, right? It takes a lot less
Yeah.
time than actually learning about yourself, learning who you are, and learning how your emotions really work. And
Yeah.
so that's the draw, right? It's simple, it's a clear, it's a really easy sell. It's like, okay, we're
Yeah.
gonna just learn how to let go of things. Well, fucking
Yeah.
great, right? But then you run into the wall, which is you can't just let go of stuff by saying you're gonna let go of stuff.
Mm,
You let go of stuff as a byproduct of getting clear with your emotions and staying present with them and feeling them fully all the way through. And then one day you're like, hey, look at that. I let that go. I didn't even realize that, but I haven't thought about that in a long time. That's how it really works. Right.
yeah.
So was that
And
condescending enough? I was aiming for like pretty
you weren't that
condescending.
bad actually. I mean, like,
Okay.
and before I even to make a stronger, I guess, stronger case for this, I do think there is, from people's perspective, there does seem to be a clear connection between thought and behavior, right? Like if I were just to say, hey, your thoughts determine your behavior, it's easy to feel, just to look at yourself and be like, yeah, like generally when I'm thinking things. And so I do think there's a way of describing what's happening at the poker table that seems true, right? Like it can seem true that if I say, well, you were thinking these things and at the same time you were acting in these ways. So if we just fix you thinking these things, you won't act these ways, which again, like you said, in theory sounds great. And it's kind of like the difference between philosophy and science is the way I would listening to you is what came to mind. Like philosophically, I can imagine or create all kind of cohesive, logical claims, right? I could just in my mind say, well, like, if all dogs are red, and I see a dog, then it's red. That is like completely logically sound, but it just doesn't map to reality, right? So like I could imagine a kind of physics of the mind where, yeah, it's just like, yeah, if you just do this, if you just think different things and thoughts are linked to behavior, then we just need to change your thoughts. I think kind of what you're pointing to though is like, but that isn't actually how people work. Like
Yeah.
the thought is a byproduct of so many other things. The thought is a representation of all these other things happening under the hood. It's the thing that you might notice most prevalently when you're in the midst of a behavior you don't like, but it's just on the surface. It's not really the thing causing it is one part of the causal train of what ended in your behavior being the thing you did not like, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, and you can't force yourself to believe something that you're not in the state to believe,
Yeah.
right? So you can
Mm.
draw from real life and see people who are in obviously unhappy relationships, but they're in denial. And you ask them
Yeah.
about it, like, oh no, things are great. You're like, no, they're really not. But they're
Mm.
not, they're not in a place to see that. So they try to, bullshit their way out of it and just, yeah, things are great because I don't want to just face the truth. But they don't actually believe things are great when they say things are great. Right. So same
Yeah.
deal. It's like, oh yeah, I got my aces cracked. Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love getting my money in good. Really? Like really? You're actually
Yeah.
happy right now that
Well,
you
well,
lost your
and
stack?
what I think what confuses examples like that is I do think there are some people who genuinely feel that way,
Mm,
right? Like who I think there are some people who get their aces cracked and that their emotional association might actually be to getting their money in good.
sure.
And then it's easy to be like, oh, if only I felt like that guy, right? Like if only
Yeah.
the difference here is I need to feel like him. Um,
Yeah, that's like because that's like less than 1% of people, right?
sure.
And then it's probably no coincidence that those people who are kind of just wired that way succeed in
Yeah,
poker to a high
exactly.
degree. And then this is the big problem, right? So you'll have the guy who is able to genuinely just let things go, right? It's not a
Yeah, yeah,
problem for whatever reason. This
exactly.
is just how
Yep.
he's built and his mind is wired in this way, and he has no problem like genuinely letting stuff go. People say, all right, how do you man, what are you doing, when you take a bad beat? And he's like, you just gotta let it go. And so for
Yeah,
him, it's true, right? It's like,
yeah,
see, yeah, you just do it. But that's not how it works for everybody else. And then
yeah,
so everybody else is gonna look at this guy and be like, okay, that's how I gotta do it. I gotta let it go. And then when they can't do it, this is the real problem. When you can't just let it go and you're looking at this guy and you're like, I want to be like this guy. He says let it go. I can't let it go. Now you go straight to the next thing, which is, well, I guess I'm just not cut out for this. I guess I don't have what it takes. I guess there's something wrong with me and I'm doing it wrong because I
yeah.
can't let it go. And so that's where it becomes a big problem because yeah, there's the guy that does well with this, but everybody else trying to be like that without having an actual process to get in the place where you're ready to let it go.
Yeah.
Now you're creating layers and layers of, emotional problems on top of one another and then they never leave.
Yeah, I do. I think you're describing well, like I view Phil Galfond as one of these people. Like when I see him talk and when I hear him talk about like the way he approaches performance and he just seems like a genuinely positive human being. Like just just resonates positive affect and so like in these experiences in these moments, like I saw him put out a post about just him thinking about his win rate and how he can tell himself to cut himself off after say like a big loss is he just thinks about his win rate and thinks like, well, am I likely to win this money back over the however long I have here given my win rate? Probably not. And so if I was just going to make, let's say, $100 an hour, would I want to stay at this table? No, I wouldn't. And so he leaves. And again, for him, this is just so aligned with internally with how he feels and what he believes. And like all the underlying mechanics just support this kind of thought process. But then you get somebody who is in the midst of deep, deep grief over the money that they lost, right? Like they're just, and now you're just telling them, hey, just think these things. Like just tell yourself your win rate, and just and then ask yourself if you would stay here. And all you're going to get is either like a layer of self-deception, which is like, I would stay here if this was my win rate. Like I would. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with this. But really, they're just grieving their loss, and all of their behavior is going to be in the pursuit of overcoming this loss. Or you, yeah, I mean that, or you get people who are just going to, um, like maybe not lie to themselves, but get up, force themselves to get up, and still regret the decision. Like there's really no way around when you're just not being honest with what you're feeling and what that feeling actually needs from you. No matter what you do, you're going to end up pretty much regretting it. Like you're not really going to be happy with what it is you do.
Yeah, yeah, it's well said. I can't really say it any better than that. We lie to ourselves all the time when we're agitated, right? Because
Yeah.
that's the mind's way of trying to calm us down.
Mm.
And then so if you don't know how to be with the pain and the discomfort, your mind is always going to say stuff that it would never say, a few hours later when you're feeling calm again. And
Yeah.
that's the genesis of like every punt that happens from people who are on tilt. It's like, oh, if I wasn't feeling that way, I wouldn't have done that. Well, how do we deal with that then? It's not by telling yourself to not feel that way, because that doesn't
Yeah.
work. That's how you got there in the first place.
Why do you think it is people, like I have my own ideas around this, but like why do you think it is people are so prone to lying to themselves? And this does seem uh, exacerbated within poker, but why do you think people are so prone to just, why is it so hard for people to be honest about what it is they're feeling?
Oh, that's just because nobody teaches people how to do this at a young age, right?
Yeah.
So if we lived in a world where in school they taught you how to be with your feelings and they taught you that it's okay to feel how you feel and that there's nothing wrong with you for feeling how you feel, and everybody's family treated them that way growing up, then yeah, that's a whole different ballgame, right? But instead, we
Mm.
live in a world where as soon as people start to have emotions and feelings, the adults in the room are just like, hey, stop that. You're inconveniencing me here, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
so you get the message that it's not okay to feel what you feel. So then you grow up and that's how you behave, right? That's what you believe, that it's not okay to feel how you feel. And so they're not like trying to lie to themselves on purpose. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel like a lie when the thought comes of like, hey, this would be a really good idea. That's genuinely the actual thought that comes. It's just coming from this place of I don't want to feel how I feel. So, hey, maybe this idea would help me to not feel how I feel because it's not okay to feel how I feel. So if you go really to
Mm.
the first part of it of just like, how do I become okay feeling how I feel? Well, it would have been great if we all had more support with that from the start.
Yeah.
But if you're listening to this conversation, then that means you have a genuine interest in it, and this can be the launching off point for you starting to spend time and energy dedicating yourself towards learning how to do that. And that's what you and I are
Yeah.
getting more people to do, right?
Yeah. And that's why I do think, it sounds kind of, I don't know, soft, but to say like it really is about self-love and self-acceptance. But so much I do view of the tension in this, in these moments, is people trying to be what they think others expect them to be, right? Is what is a good poker player? What is a good person in this situation? How do they respond? How do they feel? How are they handling this? And then how do I kind of force myself to adhere to that? And you're right. I mean, it all does come down to just how we were raised and what culture has taught us about that. It's like, no, you don't be yourself. You adhere to rules. You fit in. You do what's expected of you. You need to find a way to behave and get accepted. And but I was listening to this artist who had kind of gone through therapy and his like self-report, and him saying one of the best things he learned was that it may or may not be what good artists do, but it's what he does, right? Like this is what I do. And then another example that was given in kind of talking about this was like Einstein was like hilariously unaware of what good physicists did. He just did what Einstein did. And I think once you learn to, or slowly learn, or like, go on the journey of learning to accept yourself, you learn that you don't have to do what good poker players do. You can just do what you do. And I mean, again, funny enough, you don't really have any other options, even if you wanted to do something else, though. Um, so I have, unless you have more to add to that, I have a few uh,
Yeah,
things I'd
I'll,
like
I'll
to.
just I'll just say one thing about that, which is poker is very, very bad about conditioning its people into behaving in a certain way, right? Like, so if
Mm,
you say like the good poker player, what does
yeah,
the good poker player act like and feel like? Well, the good poker player doesn't get too happy when he's winning, doesn't get too
yeah,
sad, doesn't get too upset when losing, right? And this is what it looks like. You just look the same and try to feel the same no matter what's happening, which is one giant message of it's not okay to just feel how you feel,
yeah,
which ends up being like everybody's downfall because everybody just ends up kind of not being able to see the game and execute the game in only the way that like they could based on their own unique
yeah,
ability to see the world, right? And that's where you become great, right?
yeah,
So yeah, being good sucks because that means you're not being yourself, right?
yeah.
And so that's just what I want to say about that.
Yeah, and that's a good point to bridge the connection between what is kind of emotional well-being, which I think is super important, but also if you want to perform at your best, your instincts, your all of your most creative outputs in the game are going to overlap with everything we're talking about. Like to be in the most creative and insightful place where you're truly behaving in an original way. Um, the only pathway through that is through, I think, everything that we're referencing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have a few like kind of ideas that I'm just going to kind of say a belief, and I just want you to either like rebut it or defeat it, or respond to it and whatever feels appropriate to you.
Sure.
So I think these are some common things that people kind of believe, which is okay. So the first one is my base instincts are untrustworthy, and I need to be self-controlled or contain myself to perform at my best.
Ooh, do you want me to prop this one up too, or just tear it down?
Um, let's just tear it down. We
Let's
don't we
just
don't need to
tear it
prop.
down.
Let's just
Okay.
tear it down. Let's just yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that assumes that, whatever you come up with that's the opposite of your base instincts is trustworthy and somehow good. Like who's coming up with the distinction about like what's trustworthy and what's not? But what I can tell you is that there's one that feels a hell of a lot better when you're doing it compared to the other, right? When you're actually just feeling free and relaxed and comfortable enough to trust your instincts and go with them. Whether or not it works out, it feels a hell of a lot better, and you don't have all that worry and anxiety and self-doubt afterwards no matter what happens, right? Whereas, lots of people, they play like how they're supposed to play and they do it right. And no matter how much they win or how well it goes, there's still that lingering feeling in the back of their mind where it's like, I didn't do enough. I could have done it better. And
Mhm.
there's no amount of success that can get you feeling completely at peace with how you play when it's not actually you playing. You
Yeah,
always feel like a fraud, right? And so whether or not one is trustworthy or not makes no difference, but there's one that feels a hell of a lot better and makes it a lot more likely that you're going to have a longer career than the other.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and I would even make the case though that we are far more trustworthy than we think we are. I think people have this idea that if you look across society and like human problems, it's all due to just on people not checking their base human instincts. So like people who overeat or people who have addictions of any kind or just behaviors that you see that might be producing like where people might be harming themselves. I think there's this assumption that, well, if they were just fighting against the instincts to do whatever the thing is, so like let's say someone overeating, like if they were just pushing down that instinct maximally, then they would be living the life that they want. They wouldn't be
Yeah.
overeating, and they would be, I think that's kind of how people view these things.
That's
And
crazy
like,
because like that's literally the cause of those
yeah, yeah, yeah,
things, right?
yeah,
It's you stuff it down and then it blows up. So, you didn't eat your one cookie, every day, but then on the eighth day you ate 25 because see, you were stuffing it down, right? That's literally like the cause of it.
yeah. And I think this is unintuitive to people, but what I would point people to as a good example of this, because I think this comes down to how people view us as like we're fighting against, let's say, our animal instincts, right? But if you look at animals never overeat. There's
They're
no
pretty happy,
addiction.
man. They're
They're
pretty
they're
happy.
incredibly
They're
content. Yeah.
peaceful. They're not at
Yeah.
war with one another,
If you've ever seen chimps, they all look like they're in incredible shape. They're really, yeah, and that's the thing is like even then, like, you think like, well, we would all just like murder each other or do, whatever. It's like,
We
not
are
really,
murdering
man.
each
Like,
other. That's the
yeah,
point.
yeah,
We are murdering each
exactly.
other, and they're not, right? That's
And they're not there. And that's the thing is they're doing things to the level at which it's, let's say, needed. So it's like if you're a carnivore, you're not going on rampages of murder. You're eating the amount that you need.
yeah,
And I just think it's interesting to highlight that your instincts, like all of your capacity, is actually one that naturally promotes towards growth. Like if you just
yeah,
let yourself be in every moment as openly, it's not that everything would go right, but you would learn from it and go like you would promote yourself upward towards growth. And I think people really don't have an intuition that this is their natural capacity, that if they just let themselves be who they are, that they have the desire to take care of themselves and to learn and to they wouldn't just lay in bed and do nothing all day. They wouldn't. But I think people kind of have that idea about themselves, which just speaks to the massive amount of mistrust that has been cultivated in people's selves. That they're like, if I just let myself do whatever feels right, I would be like this disgusting, uncaged animal that would just like sleep
yeah,
and like I would never shower and I'd just be like
yeah.
rubbing shit on the walls and like like I think that's a bit of a meme, but that is somewhat how
Yeah.
people feel about themselves, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the lie, right? That's the lie. That's the projection that comes from the current state that they're in of
Right.
going decades without having a healthy relationship to their emotions. So yeah, of
Right.
course they believe that from that state.
Right. I mean, yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, I was having a conversation with someone recently, and they're like, "Yeah, but like, what if?" I was saying like, you just need to trust yourself. I was telling someone basically this advice, like, you just trust yourself and like do what feels right, and you'll make mistakes, but those mistakes are critical for learning how it is you want to behave in the future. And they're like, "Yeah, but what if I keep making, or what if I'm talking to someone and they keep making the same mistakes over and over and over?" And I'm like, well, the irony of this is people who make the same mistakes over and over and over it's usually because they don't trust themselves, right? So because they're not trusting themselves, they're filtering everything through all of these things, never really getting the feedback that they need, that this thing is hurting them. And yet they're always ending up and they're using this sort of lack of success as evidence that they're not trustworthy. And it's this really brutal cycle where you keep not trusting yourself, and so you keep not really being fully engaged with all of the information and knowledge that your nervous system and everything contains, and therefore you keep making mistakes and then you keep trusting yourself less. Whereas the moment you even tip yourself a little in the direction of trusting yourself, the opposite spiral happens. You just notice, oh wow, I know way more about how I would like to behave and what would be rewarding and how, what I will be proud of acting, and I can handle mistakes and I can, all of this, and you just kind of spiral the completely other direction.
It's so crazy, man. Everything you said is like literally exactly what I see out there all the time, right? They say create this outcome from this place of disconnection, and then you
Mm.
use that outcome as proof of why you should
Yeah.
continue living the way you are. But really, it's so simple. You can break it down even more simply, which is to just you take this person who's saying all these things, right? And you say, hey, listen, there's two ways to live, right? There's trusting yourself, there's not. There's no like, in
Yeah.
between. Are you completely happy with everything that's going on right now? No? Oh, okay, maybe you should try the other thing. right? That's literally it.
Yeah. Yeah. I posted a tweet that says, I think it was a few years ago, but I said, like, it's amazing to me how resilient human beings are. And then I said, resilient to all the evidence that they're doing things in a way that isn't
Yeah.
working for them.
Yeah. 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 Right.
um,
It's wild because like just look at the numbers and you see, okay, almost everybody is like quite ranging from like moderately unhappy to extremely unhappy. And they're all doing this one thing of living in this exact way. Well, maybe they should not do that thing because that's the
yeah.
one thing they all have in common.
Mm, yeah. All right. So something you brought up earlier was how you like, you can't change what you believe in a moment. So like, for example, if I if a bad outcome happens, if I was fully convinced that I did this the best that I could, and this outcome's out of my control, and this outcome doesn't really mean anything, surely I would feel better if I did believe that. Why 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 should people not put most of their efforts into just believing the things that people say they should believe, right? So like, why shouldn't I just like, let's say I get to a hand and clearly I'm unhappy with the result of it. Why should I not put all my efforts into just saying, well, I should just believe that I need to find out why I don't believe that results don't matter, for example, and I just need to work to convince myself that results don't matter. Why is that not a solution?
Well, because it doesn't work. It's because right. See, again, I would be the first person on board with this if it's just like, okay, yeah, I shouldn't believe this, I should believe this, we're done, right? Sounds great. It's amazing. I would be the first person to do all of these things because I like easy, right? I don't
Who
want to
doesn't?
struggle, right? So if I want to go through as fast as possible in this work, I'd be all about it. So that's just really it because don't do it that way because it doesn't work. If it worked, then do it. So if it works for you, if you're like the one person out there who
Mm,
can say to yourself like, "Oh, don't believe this," and then you do it and it works and you feel great, hey, go live your life, right? Go do your thing. But for the rest of us, right, we need a different way to understand the experience we're having, and it certainly does not help to start thinking about why we feel, why we
mm,
feel, because any answers that we come up with, again, are just being projected from our current state of agitation that
yeah,
we're not facing. So really, like we are endlessly innovative and creative and, like you said, resilient, relentless about coming up with all sorts of different ways to not just sit there and feel what we're feeling and have the experience we're having. We will come up with like all sorts of different new healing modalities and frameworks of human understanding and this and that. Literally to just not be present with the
yeah,
emotions you're having, which is the only way that you are actually going to be able to let go of stuff. So the commitment is strong from the majority of people to not do this, but it's only because that's what you were taught and because you were never given the instruction, the space to learn how to be uncomfortable, right? And once you understand that it's discomfort, it's not the end of the world, right? I'm
yeah,
very uncomfortable right now, but if I just stay here and am uncomfortable, watch what happens. Like, see, the whole
yeah,
thing is not going to blow up
yeah.
because you're uncomfortable.
Not only that, there's a true level of peace you can find in that. It's like it's hard to like that as much as being with the discomfort is, yes, like you said, uncomfortable. This frantic search for solutions to this discomfort, in my experience, is so much worse. Right? Like and it's hard to. I think what's hard for people when you talk about this is it's very experiential. The thing you and I are talking about, it's very direct. It's very like you just experience it, and then it clicks. You're like, oh, obviously, just feeling my feelings and being present with them solves so many of the things I was trying to solve. But as long as you're caught up trying to like rationalize and describe experience and make a logical train of what works, like you were saying, like it is true, like the best rebuttal from many of the things that you hear is simply because it doesn't work. And until
Yes,
you
that's
kind
all
of
I got, man.
experience, right, yeah, it's just, but like it sounds kind of it's fun. It is difficult because people might be like, yeah, but why doesn't it work?
Mm.
Or prove to me it doesn't work. And it's like, you
It's like
just
you're
have,
proof. You're the proof it doesn't
yeah,
work,
you're the proof
right?
it doesn't work. That's a good point.
Right. This is like
Yeah,
literally
this
it.
is,
You're the proof it doesn't work.
yeah, you just got to key
And
into your experience and be like, yeah, exactly. Is it working? Like, do
yeah,
you feel it working? You know,
yeah,
there is this
yeah.
other problem though of the question itself that I think is worth highlighting, which is this question of when you ask, so let, because, I've talked to people about feeling their feelings, and people will say, like, I've tried that, it doesn't work. And to me, this also overlooks the question of does it work itself, not in the way you and I are saying it, but in the way a lot of people will mean it, will mean, do I get some immediate result that was the result I was looking for right now, right? And it overlooks the fact that the results you're looking for, even the things, the end result that would mean so much to you, is incredibly fleeting. This thing that you think matters so much, like the work, it working, the evidence of it working, you winning that big tournament, will pass by really quickly. And then you're left with all of the moments where you were relating to yourself in whatever way you were relating to yourself to get there. And the question is, like, even if it did work, like you did win the thing, or you were like, what were all these moments leading up to it for? Like, was it really just for that one fleeting moment of you winning, and you just, and it was worth hating yourself and fighting yourself all the way along the way? Like, to me, like the question, like when people say like it doesn't work, it's like, well, you're missing the point that the it working is not to be found in the later moment. It working is also to be found right here in this present moment. Like, and
Mm.
if you were if you were fixated on it working in a future moment, you weren't being present. Like, you weren't doing it. Like, if you were constantly evaluating it working, then you weren't doing what I'm talking about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. People, it's again, it's just from that state, people just have an idea of like what it's supposed to look like if it was working,
Yeah.
right? And and really, those are the people that they come to me after winning their $1 million or whatever, and they're like, yeah, I felt like shit, and I didn't have that much money, but now I have $1 million and I feel like shit. So, so that's the difference. But you still feel like shit, right? So a certain level. Everybody figures this out. But some people just need to push themselves into that many, many, many times before they figure it out. Sometimes they have to wait till they're like 80 years old to see the bigger picture. And yeah, that's the thing is that like working, what does that even mean? It's a moving goalpost when you're operating from
Yeah.
that perspective. And really the only thing that matters is, what is your pattern of destruction, right? See, how do you get
Mhm.
in your own way of feeling good, right? That's all I care about. Like, do you feel good, right? Do you feel good? Are you happy with what you're
Yeah.
doing? Do you feel energized, motivated, content? See, if so, the what it looks like, the it working, money, success, that's all like super easy once you have this piece down, right? Because you
Yeah.
stand out like a sore thumb in a sea of people who are just completely miserable. And so you're able to keep going far longer, you're able to perform at a higher level, stress doesn't, bother you so much. And then so yeah, the money takes care of itself, but yeah, that's just another, deflection people come up with as like, just like endless excuses to like not just feel how you feel. And
Mm.
you know, that's if that's where the creativity is going, is finding excuses to not feel how you feel, then yeah, you're gonna end
Mm.
up in one kind of specific pattern of life over and over until you change that. But then once you do, all that creativity can flow out into the cool stuff that you're really into, the way you play poker,
Yeah.
the way you live your life.
How do you make sense of, because we're kind of, what's, I can imagine myself being a viewer, feeling like we're moving the goalposts around, like, okay, well, this is how you be happy, and this is how you perform at your best. And there's probably an overlap there, but you also clearly have examples of people who, maybe not in poker, I'm trying to think if I can think of one in poker, but certainly in a lot of fields where they are the best, and they seem to be the best because of their incredible lack of care for themselves, if that makes sense. Like they seem to be the best because they are willing to put themselves through hell and just be miserable and work harder and that uh, there isn't any measure like it doesn't seem to be satisfying them, and that's why they're the best, right? They're just perpetually unsatisfied. Do you think I do think that meme has had an impact on how people view performing at your best, that that affects what people think maybe being the best performer would be. Do you think that there's something to that in order to truly be the best in something, you have to be unsatisfied with anything other than it? Or do you think that is like a you like that happens to be true for that person, but for almost everybody, their highest degree of performance overlaps with well-being? Or do you view them as maybe not so overlapping, or what are your kind of views on that?
You could probably go either way, right? Like the thing is that like it's just accepted that this is the way to do it because the people who are currently at the top have done it this way, but then the people currently at the top did it this way only because they were not presented
Mm,
with other options, right? So like you filter down in the whole world, very few people grow up learning these things. And so of course everybody who gets to the top is going to do it this way because everybody does it this way, period, right? And
mm,
and so I don't think it has anything to do with one is more beneficial than the other. Yes, if you want to be the very best, you're going to need to dedicate lots of time to something. You're going to need to
yeah,
stretch yourself mentally. You're going to need to exert yourself physically. You're going to be exhausted sometimes from doing the things that need to be done to get your skill level where it needs to be, right? But none of those things means you have to be miserable while you're
right.
doing them, right? So pain is not suffering. Suffering is when you can't just accept that you're having the
Yeah.
experience of the pain and then you replay it over and over in your mind. See, that's the real suffering. And so yeah, like there's a lot that goes into being the best, but none of it has this requirement that you have to torture yourself. That's just a belief that's been passed down from, one generation to the next.
Yeah, and I think it might be possible that far fewer people and potentially everybody would not care about being the best if they cared for themselves. I don't know if that would be a if you would see that exist, like if everyone was just more okay with themselves. I think being the best just loses its importance, like it loses its value, and maybe or maybe not. I just wouldn't be surprised, but I actually think that sense scares people. The
Mm,
sense that they might lose some of their desire to outperform others because but they don't, again, there's this kind of circular logic. They don't realize that it's like, yeah, but you want to outperform others because you believe it's what gives you value.
yeah,
And so you're
crazy.
afraid of, you're afraid of losing the drive to do the thing that you think gives you value, but we can actually just skip a whole lot of steps and just go right to you having value. And that's what, like, a big part of what I'm trying to push more and more in the content that I'm making is that a picture of performance that leaves out well-being is not a relevant picture of performance to anybody,
Yeah.
right? Like it's just not. If you're a high performer who um doesn't ever feel satisfied, you're not a high performer in my opinion. Like we've completely misused this term. Like, what have you done? What have you done if you're the best in something and you at the end of your life you feel you wasted it? Like, what have you really accomplished? And I think we really need to, even if it's the case that we would just get fewer high performers or people would, not be the best if they learned to be happy. Like, we have to start baking in your ability to be happy to our definition of what it means to perform, or it's just what do yeah, it's just I don't see any other way.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I've actually categorized it into like high achiever and then actual
Sure.
success, right? So achievement, success, two very different things. Success
Mm,
requires you to achieve in a way that's, reliable, sustainable, in which where you feel good and you're motivated, and that the more you do, the better you feel. Whereas
mm,
the achievers, the more they do, the worse they feel, right? And
yeah.
so there's a big difference in the two. What I tell people when they say all that stuff of like, oh yeah, what if, all of a sudden I'm just feeling good and and I'm completely happy, and all of a sudden I don't feel like doing all of these things to be the best. You're not gonna care.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah,
the that's because you're
yeah,
not gonna care. You're gonna be happy,
yeah,
right? And that's the thing. And I actually don't agree with the idea there's gonna be like lower performance ceilings. I actually think it's gonna go up because the people who truly, truly want to do all of the extra things to go to the top will do them, and then they'll do them from a place of just contentment and none of this like, oh God, am I doing it right? Or am I doing enough? They're just going to go higher than they would in the current model. And then the
yeah,
people who don't actually want to be there, they won't be there. And then
yeah,
so everybody gets to be happy, right? So that's the point is you miss the point of like you do
yeah.
all this to feel how you want to feel, but in this mythical future that you're worried about, you're actually feeling exactly how you want to feel. So you got what you wanted.
So you're fine.
And
Yeah,
then from there, if you do want to do all that stuff to be the best, you're gonna be even better than you would have been. And if you
yeah,
don't, that's because it's you didn't really want to in the first place. And so that's also great because then you'll go and do what you actually want to do, and that'll be awesome too, right? So that's
yeah.
that's the thing
And
for me.
there's literally not a concern you can bring up that doesn't fit into, yeah, but then you would want that. So like I could imagine someone being like, well, like I have to perform really highly because I have to take care of my family and my kids. It's like, okay, well, then that is also something you will want. That is also something you will feel. That will
Yeah.
also motivate you to do the thing. Like there's really no way around this. And yeah, the picture is really interesting that you actually brought up because it is possible that this kind of self-loathing model of performance does so well because when you mass multiply it, the amount of people who can sustain performance while feeling that way are so few that the one person who can sustain performance, like the one person who just has endless amounts of resilience, just rises to the top, right? They're just like, I can hate myself to the day I die. And, that person, they just, but whereas if everyone in that field, uh, was doing it because they had more, like if it was more adaptive, it is more adaptive to the average person to just do it because you love it, do it because you're enjoying it, you'll be able to put so much more time into the average level performance raises, and therefore the performance of the highest people would raise as a result. And that's just like an interesting thing I had never really thought about the effect of where performance might go. But
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you put everybody in a room who does things the same way, and then you take a poll and then you get this consensus that this is just how things work.
yeah,
But you just need to put somebody else in that room who's got a better idea,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And it's not a coincidence to me that like everybody's favorite book in poker for a while, maybe it still is, was like Grit, right? It's like, yeah, you need grit,
oh
right? And
yeah,
you're gonna be like, you just like, it does not matter how much it hurts, you got to keep doing your deliberate practices, and then that's what ultimately leads to the most successful people who report the highest self-esteem. Well, guess what? You can have a lot of self-esteem and still feel completely unsatisfied with no fulfillment or purpose in your life, right? Because you draw the self-esteem from the fact that
mm,
achieved,
mm,
right? Achievement, not
yeah,
success. And so, yeah, I think the ceiling is far higher than people actually perceive it to be. There's just not enough people uh, dedicated to living in this way to show it yet. But we aim to change that.
yeah. Do you think something like grit has a place in people's performance? Like something like pushing through discomfort in a more like with the attitude of more just like I just need to endure this and just get through it. Like I don't like do you think that has a place in what you would advise people or
Not for me. I mean, see, pushing through versus being with, big difference
yeah,
in your approach in terms of your acceptance of your experience, right? Pushing through means I am not okay with this, so we're going to do this, this, and this so that I don't have to experience this anymore, right? Being with is like, oh yeah, this is a challenge, right? I'm exhausted, I'm
yeah,
stretched all the way through. I have very little left, and can I still feel okay in myself? Do I still feel like me while I'm experiencing these things? And then let's go from there, right? So the actions and the end result might look the same, but the way you feel during, throughout, and after is completely different.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I could imagine some scenarios where I'm in a situation. I need to get to the other side of the situation. I know I need to. Like I know the end result is aligned with what I want to accomplish. In the interim, there are feelings for whatever reason. I don't actually have the capacity to be with them. Like I haven't practiced or cultivated the ability to be with them. And in that situation, my only lever might be something like grit. It might be just, okay,
Mhm.
I just need to push through this and get
Yeah.
through it. And I need to continue to work to be able to be present, to expand what I can be present with and to, but in this short term period of time, grit might be all that I have.
Yeah, look, I get it, right? But how you do it is how you're going to be when you get there. So you're always going to make that choice. You're
Mm,
not going to make a different choice the next time you're pushed to your limit.
mm,
You're going to make the exact same choice. So it's not like, oh yeah, this time I'm gonna let myself do it this way, and then next time I'm not. No, no, I swear, the next time you're gonna do it the exact same way until the priority has shifted of like, is it more important for me to get this thing done, or is it more important for me to feel okay in myself? That's a choice, right?
yeah.
And at some point you've got to decide that like that's number one, and that's
Mm,
non-negotiable. And then so once that's in place, then you will start to make that choice and get the right information, get the right support, learn how to actually feel what you need to feel in order to keep going, right? But until then, you're just bullshitting yourself, lying to yourself, saying, okay, like, yeah, present with my feelings, that's great and all, but I got a job to do. Well, nothing's going to change. That's just going to
yeah.
keep going.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I spoke on your podcast on, you could say that I was a very like kind of like you, like I was a very strong believer in many of these ideas of like grit and just perseverance and I me personally put them to my kind of ultimate test of going through buds and SEAL training and came up pretty empty handed. So I think that was a very big like learning experience for me. I will say, but again, this is to kind of miss the point. But I will say like I did get a lot of things done. I did do a lot of things that I
Yeah.
wouldn't have been able to do. But you're right that it did.
Well, you don't know that you wouldn't have been able to do them.
Sure, sure, sure.
Maybe you'll go
Yeah,
back.
yeah, yeah. I think I'm too old. I think I'm too old to go back at this point. But I mean, no. I mean, I do feel what I can say, and whether or not this would I don't know if this will upset people, but I can say I feel so much more confident about my ability to get through something like that today than and in a real disillusioned way. Whereas I would claim confidence before I went through it before, but it was a like a desperate plea for this to be true, and I
Yeah.
deep down I knew that. But yeah, it is yeah, I mean obviously I agree and it's yeah, it's tough out there, but I really do hope this conversation goes to persuading people that like the just any kind of thought-based model for improving your well-being and performance is just like it's not what's fundamentally real for you. Like it's a bad proxy for the thing that you actually care about, which is like what does it feel like in this moment? Like that's the thing you care about. And like you said, achievements are a very bad proxy for success. And like I just would encourage people to stop using proxies. Like you can just deal with the thing itself. The thing that you really care about. You don't have to be like, well, this achievement matters to me because it will mean I'll be happy. This thing matters to me because it'll mean I'll be happy. This thing will no, you can just go straight to the thing itself, which is how does it feel to be you in this moment? And are you okay with that? And if the answer is no, let's just work on the thing you actually care about.
Yeah, it doesn't take that long either. That's the thing.
Yeah.
People think, oh, I don't want to spend years doing that. No, this is like a 2 second decision, right? And can I just
Yeah.
have the experience I'm having and completely accept it?
Yeah. Yeah, I might disagree with that a little, but like I've mentioned before, I think you might be a savant in this domain and have a lack of respect for the how deep the lack of acceptance can run in some of us. But
Well, with the caveat of once I've trained you in how to do it, it takes 2 seconds.
yeah,
There
yeah,
you
yeah. There you go. There.
go.
Hopeworthpresence.com, everybody.
There you go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There you go. Yeah, read the
uh,
book.
yeah, there's yeah, read the book.
Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect segue. go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you, and if you're working on any projects right now that you might want to share, or
Yeah, I just started a YouTube channel, so Poker with Presence on YouTube. So I'm pretty pumped to make stuff on there. And then my favorite thing I do is I write a newsletter every day to people and share some insights and tips and ideas on how to be at your best while feeling good. And that's completely free. That's how, all my favorite people who I've ended up working with just started reading. And that's how you can kind of get to understand a lot of these things we're talking about at a deeper level. So that's my favorite recommendation to give to people. It's over my website at pokerwithpresence.com.
beautiful. It is worth saying, you are in the realm of newsletter writing. You are the top performer. I've never known someone to output newsletters like you output newsletters. It is truly amazing.
Hey,
Um,
well, that's the byproduct of how I live, right? See,
right.
I'm the proof that it works.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
that's the difference between what I see a lot of people teaching and then what I'm up to here is that like, see what I teach, I do. And so if you just watch my performance increase year
Yeah.
after year after year, well, you can do that too, right? But then you see other people, they're teaching like a system, a framework,
Mm.
and they're not producing at any higher levels year after year because they're just teaching something that they learned, right? But
Mhm.
I'm actually doing the stuff, and then so my understanding of how this works keeps growing, and so my production keeps growing, and the quality of my work keeps growing, and that's what I want for everybody.
Yep. It's a good sign of someone you should work with. All right. Well, thank you so much. And until next time.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you for watching. That was my conversation with Jason Su. You can find Jason on X at Poker with Presence, and you can find him on YouTube at Poker with Presence. And he has a great book titled Poker with Presence. And if you are looking for coaching and you want to try it out, or you are not sure if you can afford it, I offer donation-based coaching every Friday that you can book on my website. And also Jason has his site, Poker with Presence, where you can reach out to him for coaching as well. Thank you so much. And I look forward to the next episode with you all.